So welcome back. In our previous lesson, we saw how we could use the code to trigger a change of a value on a label, for instance. In this lesson, we want to see how we can change the UI using buttons through the code. So let's get started. I'm going to head into Xcode and I'm going to start a new project. This new project app, I'm going to call it buttons. And for my buttons, I'm going to do exactly the same thing that we did last time, which is I'm going to go to my main.storyboard file. In the storyboard file, I'm going to go ahead in here and say, give me a button, and I'm going to put it right there. And that's all I'm going to be doing in here. I'm not going to change any of its attributes or size or anything just yet. What I want to be doing is I want to make sure that I have both a function and an outlet for this button. So I'm going to make one of them manually and one of them using drag and drop. So that could be a bit of a refresher for us as well. I'm going to head into my view controller. I'm going to get rid of all of these comments and I'm going to get rid of this part, view did load. I'm going to say I have this. I have an @ib outlet, weak variable. Let's call it my button, which is of the type UI button. What does really matter is this part, the UI button type. The name of it doesn't really matter. I'm going to save this file, go back to my storyboard, and in here I'm going to select my view controller, go up to the connections inspector, and I have received this outlet. So I'm going to drag it and drop it over my button. So that part is taken care of. Now let's do the other connection and let's do this one using drag and drop. So I'm going to open another window. And then on the left, I'm going to load my view controller. And on the right, we have our button. So here, I'm going to go ahead, hold the control button, drag and drop over here. And then it says, what kind of connection do you want to make? I'm going to say make an action connection. And I'm going to call this one my action or anything that you want to be calling it, depending on what you're doing. So we've got an outlet and we've got an action. And now we can actually head back to working on our code, which is the actual thing of doing when developing anything basically. If I run the code right now, nothing really happens because as I'm running the code in here, I can press the button on the button outlet and nothing is going to happen simply because we haven't really written anything in the body of our code. So that's what I want to be doing in here. The first thing I want to do is I actually want to change the background color of the button. So I'm going to say my button dot background color becomes UI color dot red, and that's as simple as it gets. So when I press the button should turn red. So let's see if that actually works. I press that and that happens. Now our button is actually very small. Maybe it makes sense that we make it a little bit larger in here. So I could actually go in here and say you are a lot larger so we can see it easier. This doesn't really have any implications in terms of what we are coding. It just makes it more visible. So I'm going to press that and the background color becomes red. I feel like that's such a distracting color. So maybe yellow would be a better choice in here. So I press that and the background becomes yellow. Now, what if I wanted to change the color of the text? So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to search my button dot text color, but there isn't really anything like that because the way that the button works is that you have to change the title color. So I'm going to say set title color. And then when I'm changing the set title color, these are two different ways of accessing an attribute. This is basically setting an attribute that doesn't have an equal sign or anything. You basically set it to be something. This one is when you assign it to be a value. So this one is assigning the yellow to be for the background color. This one is setting the value to be of a certain thing. So I'm going to say the background, the text color becomes UI color dot black. So it becomes black. And then it says, what's the state that you want to tap? So let's see, what does that mean? The states are like this. The states are highlighted, normal, reserved, selected, or any other state that a button can have. I only care about the normal mode. So before anyone has basically pressed on it. So that's what we can do in here. I'm going to run the application again. When it runs, we will end up seeing that when I press the button, the text of it becomes black, even though it's a little bit difficult to see, and the background of it becomes yellow, or let's make it one last time to change it to orange. Now, before I move forward, I want to show you one more thing. in here, we actually made an outlet called my button of the type UI button, and that's the one we are changing in our function. But there is another way of doing the same thing in here, and that is through this guy, sender. The sender basically refers to who is calling the function. So you have this function called myAction, is doing some stuff, but someone is triggering this, and that is the sender. The sender knows what object is being triggered. The type of sender is not UI button or button in general, is basically any, simply because any function or any outlet could call a function. This could be called by a slider, could be called by an on-off switch, or anything that the user can interact with it. But if we wanted to, we could actually do this. We could actually go in here and say, sender, I know it is going to be a UI button. So I basically force it to be a UI button because I know my sender is a button. If we do that, and if we run our code in here and I press the button, so far nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed is that the app knows built into it the function that is called myAction is being triggered by someone that is the type of UI button. But we are still using the my button to do stuff in here. As you can imagine now, I could actually say, well, instead of changing the my button, just change the sender. So sender, the background color becomes orange, and sender, the title becomes black, because sender is this guy, whoever is sending us the information. Let's go ahead and run the code again. And when we run it now, we will see that when I press the button, exactly the same thing happens. Now, you might be wondering, so do we even need this outlet anymore? And the answer to that is no, we don't really need this anymore. So if I want, I could actually get rid of it. I'm going to remind myself that I have to get rid of it in here as well. Otherwise, my application is going to crash because my button is still there. I'm going to click on that little cross button, get rid of it. And now what's happening is that when the application runs, it basically says, whoever is calling the function, that is the one I want to, change color on it or change the title or anything like that on it. And that works absolutely well the way we were expecting it. So the goal was this part, understanding the role of the sender. What does the sender actually do for us? You could use the same thing similarly if you were working on a slider, for instance, or a switch, and that's something I will show you in just a few lessons. So at any point when you're calling a function using an IP action, you can actually feed the type of it to your sender, and you can do stuff with that. So that's pretty much it for how we use buttons and how we use senders. Let's keep it up to here and let's move on to our next lesson.